welcome back for one last look at Upper Valley Mall in Springfield, Ohio. The mall closed to the public on June 16, 2021, after 50 years. We were here a few days after it closed to document what was left. I visited this mall once before, a few days after Christmas in 2018, and visiting on this day, after everyone and nearly everything was gone, was extremely surreal. Not that it was terribly lively back then, it wasn't. I would estimate at the time of my last visit there were about 20 stores open inside, but it had a sense of life in it. People mall walking, having lunch, the Santa display was still up, and everything was decorated for Christmas. All good things come to an end, however, malls included. It's a side effect of getting older, and I wish they'd come up with something to treat that. It's not every day I get to go into a mall where I have permission to be there and have the run of the place, and we're going to get to see a lot of stuff I wouldn't ordinarily get to show you, so get comfortable. We're going on a journey. I'm happy to report that nearly all sentimental items from the mall, including pictures and parts of the old Christmas display that featured the Peanuts gang, are now in the possession of the Clark County Historical Society, where they'll be preserved for posterity. I participated in their Zoom call a few days before this was filmed, where people shared their memories of the mall, and people really love this place. Looking in these storefronts, it was easy to imagine them full of people and activity, despite the darkness. What we're about to enter here was a Woolworth when the mall opened. After closing in 1992, it was occupied by Elder Beerman until 2012, then a satellite campus of the Boonshoff Museum of Discovery, a children's science museum, and finally an antique store until early 2019. Now that everything has been moved out, it's amazing to me that neither tenant who followed Elder Beerman changed much about the space, and it still looks like a department store in 1992, so closely that you can almost hear it. It's easy to get lost in your imagination walking around a place like this, but I eventually remembered where I was and that I was the only one in here. The odd thing to me is that it would have been a pretty small Elder Beerman, but it has to have been a huge Woolworth, although part of it was occupied by a restaurant. Onward down the corridor is the former Sears, which was the last anchor to leave the mall on March 31st, 2019. This location managed to stick around longer than any of the Sears stores in Dayton, the last of which closed the year before. The last time I was here, Sears had just announced their closure and were in the process of putting up going out of business sale signs. One thing a lot of people don't realize about the economics of malls is that the anchor buildings, despite being attached, are usually owned by the respective retailer that occupies them. Sears closed, as I mentioned, in March of 2019. The county's land bank owns the entire rest of the mall, but Sears still owns their building, which is probably why the gate was closed and I couldn't get in there. Upper Valley Mall was developed by one of the most prolific mall building firms in Ohio, the Youngstown-based Edward J. DeBartolo Company. It opened in 1971. The centerpiece of the mall, which we're seeing off to the side here, a Reich's department store that was splashed with bright primary colors and big, bold geometric sculptures, extremely on trend for the time. Reich's was part of Federated Department Stores, along with its corporate sibling Shillito's, and the store was rebranded as Shillito Reich's in 1982, changing again to Lazarus in 1986. In 2005, the Lazarus name was dropped as part of the Macy's Federated merger to become Macy's, which it remained until its closure in 2015. Upper Valley Mall's grand opening was celebrated with a multi-page supplement in the Springfield newspaper and was billed as Southern Ohio's most luxurious new mall. Most of the same tenants remained through the 70s and 80s because they were successful during what was the golden age of the American shopping mall. The DeBartolo Company's mall business was absorbed into Simon Properties in 1996. Simon owns interest in over 200 properties nationwide, mostly malls and shopping centers. Because Upper Valley at the time was doing well and was long established, they didn't make many, if any, changes, other than to remove the once beautiful fountains and seating from the center court, which had probably fallen into that perilous gap where something that's been around a while isn't quite old enough to be vintage, but it's just old enough to be out of style. I think I speak for people who appreciate malls everywhere that I wish those fountains had stuck around. Simon's approach to the mall is that if it wasn't broke, there was no reason to fix it. They did, however, use the mall as collateral to take out a $47 million loan that they ultimately ended up defaulting on in 2012 when the mall was appraised at around $20 million. It was placed in receivership and purchased by a new owner. Due to many factors, including the changing economic landscape of the surrounding town and the shaky financial ground the mall's owners at the time had left it on, occupancy slid from 94% in 2011 to 72% in 2015. The mall's burgeoning occupancy issues caused the city and county to lose revenue. Until 2010, Upper Valley Mall was the county's single largest source of sales tax proceeds. What we're looking at just now is a Victoria's Secret that sported the chain's late 90s store design until its closure in early 2020. It was one of only a few national tenants left at the time. In what may have been the single most devastating set of events to the health of the mall, Macy's and JCPenney, which we're approaching now, announced their closure within one day of each other in 2015. They were, in fact, the only mall in the US that lost both stores in that round of closings, sheerly by coincidence. The announcements were made just as the mall was changing hands to its new owner. Neither space has held a retail tenant in the 6 years since. However, the JCPenney was used last year as a COVID testing and vaccination site operated by the county. After new Upper Valley associates failed to bring new life to the site, the county's land bank purchased the mall property for $200,000 in 2018. The mall's mortgage debt was paid, and the mall was owned by the county free and clear to do what they wanted with the rapidly emptying mall. They really wanted to turn the property into something that would benefit the citizenry, and things like an indoor community center and a youth sports complex were investigated. The county only intended to own the mall for a few months while a buyer was sought, but nearly 3 years later, and after the pandemic thoroughly battered the worldwide economy, the decision was made to close the mall permanently. It is in the final stages of being sold to a firm called Industrial Commercial Properties. If you're a regular viewer, you probably recognize that name from our last video at Chapel Hill Mall in Akron, which is another recent purchase for the company. It will likely be used for some sort of warehousing or light industrial purpose, which will reliably bring in something that a lot of people really need: jobs. From a purely objective numbers and figures standpoint, this is great news for an economically depressed area that has seen jobs pack up and leave time and time again over the decades. Even though I know this is a good thing, and I say this in a lot of these videos, if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, you made memories at the mall. It's hard to know you can't go back and visit when you feel like reminiscing. Maybe your mall closed already. Maybe, like me, your mall looks so different these days that it doesn't even feel like the same place. Maybe this was your mall. Before the internet, this is where you'd go to find out what the latest styles were, whose new album you could be the first to have, where you'd go to camp out in front of the magazines and Walden books reading the latest gossip about that cute guy and that band until the manager threw you out for loitering. I say this from experience. It was where you'd go to buy your prom dress, where you took your kids to see Santa for the first time, and maybe where you walked with your grandparents for the last time. The mall may be gone, but what we did and who we were when we went there will always be remembered. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane. If you did, drop us a like and consider subscribing. A very special thank you to Phil, Eva, Dean, TJ, and the rest of our patrons for helping make trips like this one possible. If you'd like to support our channel by becoming a patron, please see the link in the description. As always, I'm your cruise director, Kristen, and this is UniComm Productions. I'll catch up with you on the road next time.